We are in the third week of Advent and the third week of our series, Waiting for the Light. This morning, our scripture comes from the fourth gospel, John's gospel. We hear John 1, verses 6 through 28. You'll see that on the front of your Grove study guide, so I invite you to follow along as we hear these words. There was a man sent from God, whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God, who were born not of blood, or of the will of the flesh, or the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and lived among us. And we have seen his glory, the glory as of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. John testified to him and cried out, "This was he of whom I said, he who comes after me ranks ahead of me, because he was before me. From his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. The law indeed was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God. It is God, the only Son, who is close to the Father's heart, who has made him known. This is the testimony given by John when the Jews sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, 'Who are you?' He confessed and did not deny it, but confessed, 'I am not the Messiah.' And they asked him, 'What then? Are you Elijah?' He said, 'I am not.' Are you the prophet?' He answered, 'No.' Then they said to him, 'Who are you? Let us have an answer for those who sent us. What do you say about yourself?' He said, 'I am the voice of one crying out in the wilderness, make straight the way of the Lord, as the prophet Isaiah said.' Now they had been sent from the Pharisees. They asked him, 'Why then are you baptizing if you are neither the Messiah nor Elijah nor the prophet?' John answered them, 'I baptize with water. Among you stands one whom you do not know, the one who is coming after me. I am not worthy to untie the thong of his sandal.' This took place in Bethany, across the Jordan, where John was baptizing. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. There was a man sent from God. There was a man sent from God. There was a man sent from God. That phrase, I confess, makes me a little bit uncomfortable. Sent from God. Sometimes we say sent by God. I don't know, there's just something about that phrase that seems kind of foreign to me. I use the term call all the time. You probably know that. I use it in almost every sermon. We're called to do this or that. I will say we're called as people of God. Sometimes I will say I was called to ordained ministry, or the church is called to a certain ministry. I was called to serve Madison Christian Church, I might say, but I have never once said I was sent by God to Madison Christian Church. It just kind of seems a little wrong to me. And in my mind, there's just always been a little bit of a difference between called and sent. Sort of like maybe being called is that God has come to us where we are and commissioned us to do something good for the kingdom. But being sent maybe means that we were with God, aligned with God in some special way, and therefore were commissioned to go somewhere else. It seems like there's just always been a little bit of a difference in my mind. Maybe even a big difference, if I'm honest. And I have a very hard time shaking the baggage of claiming that God has sent me anywhere. It just feels elitist, maybe, is the word that I think of. Or my granny would say, it's so highfalutin. And yet, here in the beginning of the fourth gospel, we have an Advent story. And we are presented with ascending. God sent John the Baptist to prepare the way of the Lord. And in fact, there are a lot of sendings if you read the Bible. God sent Moses to free the people. God sent Jonah to Nineveh. And we know what happened when Jonah didn't go where God sent him. It causes a little bit of trouble. Paul, in the New Testament, talks a lot about being sent by God. And before ascending into heaven, Jesus sent his followers out into the world, saying, go and make disciples. Go and announce the good news. God sends, and Jesus also sends. And it's people like us. If you read in the stories, it's people like us who get sent. I don't know about you, but when I think of getting sent somewhere, it's not usually somewhere good. Maybe this is why I have a little trouble with the sent versus called kind of thing. I get sent to my room. I used to get sent to my room by my parents a lot. I got sent to the principal's office. Yes, I did. And then I got sent to detention. So when I think of sent, maybe, there's some negative connotation attached to it. Like it either suggests something highfalutin, or it suggests that's where you go when you've done something wrong. You get sent somewhere else when you've done something wrong. So when I set out this week with this scripture in my mind and studying it, and I read that first phrase, there was a man sent from God, I decided to examine John's sentness. Maybe there's something that will help us gain a new perspective. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. What we know is that he came as a witness. He came to testify to the light so that all might believe through him. And he was not the light, but came to testify to the true light that was coming into the world. And as I started reading through that, what I noticed first was that the sending of John is not really about John. It's not about John first. It's crystal clear that while John is being sent, he's being sent to testify to something else, to the light. He was not the light himself. He says that clearly. I had a professor in seminary who wrote the first day that he walked in our class of church administration. He wrote on the board, "There is a God, ... You are not him." There is a God, and you are not him. And when inevitably one of us in class would get a little too highfalutin and wander off into territory that was not our own and say something like, "Well, at my church," instead of saying, "Well, at the church I serve, at my church, this is the way that elders do, blah, blah, blah." He would just point to the board, and he would then do this to the class, and everyone in the class would say, "There is a God, and you are not him." So we were treated to this regularly. There is a God, and you are not him. A reminder that we were sent by God to serve, but that we were not indeed God. God sent John to serve, to be a witness, to testify to something greater. And this is the testimony that John gave when the leaders came to ask him who he was. If you look near the bottom of the reading, you'll see it. His answer, I am not. That's what he testified. I am not the Messiah. I am not Elijah. I am not the prophet. Maybe you remember a few months ago when we were doing a series in the Gospel of John, in the fourth Gospel, that we talked about Jesus' I am statements. There are many of them in this Gospel where Jesus says, I am the good shepherd, or I am the true vine. I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. In the fourth Gospel, it is Jesus who testifies, I am. But before Jesus comes, there is one who comes before and says, I am not. That is my testimony. I am not. But there is a Messiah who is coming. I am not him. But let us make the path straight. It's clear that John is not the Messiah, but it is also just as clear that he has a specific role to play. God has sent him for this purpose, to fulfill this role, to prepare the way of the Lord. At summer camp, when I was growing up at church camp, we had a tradition that we called morning watch. And there were several cabins in our church camp, and each day one cabin was assigned to keep morning watch. And morning watch went like this. If it was your cabin's turn to keep morning watch, you would get up before sunrise, go out and sit on the platform. There was this big dock platform in silence, sit together in silence and watch for the sun to rise, for the light to come in the morning. And when the light came, we got up and we went cabin to cabin shouting, a new day is dawning, prepare the way of the Lord. And then that cabin would get up and we'd go to the next cabin. A new day is coming, prepare the way of the Lord. And so day after day, people were sent to other people to prepare them for the new day. It's how we woke up every morning. God sent a man named John to prepare the way for his son, to be a voice crying out in the wilderness. He was sent by God in the same way that God sent Moses to Pharaoh, and the same way God sent the prophets to bring God's word of justice, and the way that God sent the apostles. But the world still needs people to keep morning watch. The world still needs people to prepare the way for the coming of the Messiah into the world. The world still needs people to work for justice. God still needs people who will bring God's peace. And though it may sound uncomfortable, God is sending you. God is sending me. We are sent into the world to keep morning watch, to testify to the light, out into the darkness, into the wilderness of this world. God is sending you to be a voice crying out, prepare the way of the Lord. Can you say it with me? Prepare the way of the Lord. Announce it again. Prepare the way of the Lord. Prepare the way of the Lord. What good news of great joy for all people. Let us prepare the way. We are being sent by God.